Imagine building your entire life, your career, from nothing, only to have it all ripped away in an instant. All because of your race. Racism in corporate America isn't just a thing of the past, it's happening right now, in boardrooms, behind closed doors, where power, money, and prejudice collide. Have you ever wondered how many successful black professionals face this kind of injustice every day? How many people of color are pushed aside, their success undermined, simply because of the color of their skin? Scene shifts to logo and call to action. Are we truly making progress, or are we just scratching the surface? If you want to hear more stories of resistance and resilience, make sure to hit that subscribe button on Folktales by Lisa. Don't miss out, your support matters. Lena Williams had spent her entire career proving that black women could not only break barriers but also thrive in spaces that were historically reserved for others. As the CEO of Parkview Community Bank, she had risen from a small, family-run institution to one of the most successful banks in the region. Her journey wasn't just about building a business, it was about making a statement, about showing the world that success was not confined to the privileged elite. Lena had been the embodiment of hard work and perseverance, the kind of leader who inspired both her employees and her community. On that fateful Wednesday morning, Lena entered the gleaming glass doors of Parkview Community Bank, the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air as employees went about their usual hustle. The bank's lobby, with its polished marble floors and modern design, felt like her second home. She greeted the staff with a warm smile, exchanging pleasantries with a few colleagues before heading to her office for her daily briefing. But just as she was about to enter the elevator, two security guards approached her. Their uniforms were crisp, their faces unreadable. "Ms. Williams, we need to escort you out," one of them said, his voice detached. Lena paused, her mind racing. "What do you mean, escort me out?" "I'm the CEO here," she replied, her voice calm but with a hint of confusion. The guard didn't flinch. "You've been asked to leave. We've been informed that you're no longer authorized to be here," he said, motioning for her to follow. Lena's heart sank. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. It was as if everything she had worked for had just been ripped away in an instant. The pride of being the first black woman to lead a major bank, the countless hours she had poured into the institution, it was all being erased, all because of something far deeper than business. As Lena sat in her car, still reeling from the shock of being kicked out of her own bank, a deep sense of anger and betrayal surged within her. The luxury of the car's leather seats did little to soothe the fire that had ignited in her chest. How could this happen? How could the very institution she had built from the ground up betray her so callously? Lena had faced challenges throughout her career, but never like this. She had built Parkview Community Bank into a powerhouse, and now, in a matter of hours, it seemed as though it had all been taken away from her. Not because of her lack of skill or leadership, but because of who she was. Her hand shook as she grabbed her phone from the passenger seat. The text messages were filled with well-meaning condolences from colleagues, but all she could focus on was the undeniable truth: this was more than just a corporate shakeup. This was racism. Lena took a deep breath and dialed the number of her trusted attorney, Malcolm Stone. He was a renowned civil rights lawyer, known for his dedication to fighting systemic discrimination in corporate America. Lena knew he was the only person who could help her navigate this nightmare. "Malcolm, it's Lena," she said, her voice steady despite the flood of emotions inside her. "I've been kicked out of my own bank. They've removed me as CEO, and I know it's because of my race. I need your help. Now." Malcolm's voice was calm but filled with urgency. "I'm on my way," he replied. "We're not letting them get away with this. This is more than just an unfair decision, it's a violation of your rights, and we'll fight it every step of the way." Lena felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone in this fight. She had spent years breaking barriers, and now, with Malcolm by her side, she was ready to take on the system that had worked to keep people like her out of the top echelons of corporate America. She wasn't going down without a fight. The following hours passed in a blur, but one thing was clear: Lena Williams was not about to let this go without a fight. The betrayal she had experienced was too personal, too deep to ignore. With Malcolm Stone leading the charge, Lena's legal team quickly mobilized, ready to confront Parkview Community Bank head-on. By the time Lena returned to the bank, she knew this was going to be more than just a legal battle. It was a war for justice. The lobby, which had always been a place where Lena felt proud to walk through, now felt hostile and cold. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she made her way toward the executive floor. She could feel the eyes of the employees on her, some filled with sympathy, others with fear. No one dared to speak up, but the tension in the air was palpable. The boardroom door swung open, and there they were, the very people who had once hailed her as a trailblazer now sitting in judgment. Several executives who had once supported her stood around a polished mahogany table, their faces grim and uncertain. But Lena didn't let their discomfort shake her resolve. "You have a lot of explaining to do," Lena said, her voice cutting through the silence. She stepped into the room, her black leather bag, the one that bore her initials, LW, held firmly in her hand. The bag, a symbol of all she had accomplished, felt heavier than ever before. One of the senior executives, a man she had once considered a mentor, stood up. "Lena, we believe this is for the best," he began, his voice strained. "The direction the bank has taken under your leadership hasn't been aligned with our vision." Lena's heart clenched. "This isn't about direction," she said, her eyes narrowing. "This is about race. You don't want a black woman leading this bank, and that's the truth." Before anyone could respond, the door flew open again. Malcolm Stone and his team of lawyers stormed into the room, their presence commanding attention. "This is over," Malcolm declared. "The lawsuit is going forward, and you will be held accountable for your actions." He placed a stack of documents on the table, each one a piece of evidence, emails, internal memos, and recordings, that proved Lena had been targeted because of her race. "We've got the proof, and you won't be able to weasel your way out of this," Malcolm said, his voice steady but filled with authority. Lena stood tall, her anger replaced by a quiet, determined strength. This wasn't just about her position at Parkview Community Bank. This was about standing up to the systemic racism that had held so many others back, the kind of racism that had been hidden beneath the polished surface of corporate America for too long. As the executives shifted uneasily in their seats, Lena knew this was only the beginning. They had underestimated her once before, but she would never let them do so again. This battle was far from over, and she was ready to fight it to the bitter end. The days following Lena's confrontation at Parkview Community Bank were a whirlwind. The story of her forced ousting quickly made headlines, sparking outrage across the nation. Social media was flooded with messages of support from people who recognized the blatant racism at play, while others demanded justice for a leader who had been unjustly removed from her position because of her race. It was as if the world had been waiting for someone to finally speak out, and Lena had become that voice. Her legal team, led by the unrelenting Malcolm Stone, worked around the clock to build an airtight case. They uncovered a trail of evidence, emails, memos, and even recorded conversations, that revealed a pattern of racial discrimination at the highest levels of the bank. It wasn't just Lena's termination, it was the systemic way the bank had treated her, and others like her, throughout her tenure. Malcolm and his team found that Lena's leadership had consistently been undermined, her decisions questioned, and her authority challenged, all for one reason. Because she was a black woman in a position of power. Her success had made her a target. The bank's elite board, made up primarily of white men, had never truly accepted her as an equal. Every victory she had achieved had been met with subtle sabotage, and her ousting was the final straw in a long series of covert racial hostilities. As the legal battle unfolded, Lena's courage inspired others. Former employees, many of whom were too afraid to speak out before, came forward with their own stories of discrimination. The public rallied behind Lena, and protests outside the bank's headquarters became a daily occurrence. Lena's social media became a platform for countless people who shared their experiences of systemic racism in corporate America, using her hashtag Justice for Lena. The fight wasn't easy. The board of Parkview Community Bank fought back fiercely, using every legal loophole they could find. They tried to discredit Lena, painting her as an unstable leader, but the evidence was undeniable. Every courtroom session, every press conference, brought the truth closer to the surface. Lena's team was relentless, and as each legal document was filed, each piece of evidence was presented, it became clear, this battle wasn't just about one woman fighting for her job. It was a battle for the future of corporate America, where people of color could rise to the top without fear of being pushed back down the moment they succeeded. Lena knew this was a long fight. But she was no stranger to adversity. This wasn't the first time she had faced discrimination, and it wouldn't be the last. But this time, she wasn't going to let it slide. This time, she was going to win. After weeks of intense legal battles, public outcry, and mounting pressure, Lena Williams stood on the steps of Parkview Community Bank, the weight of her hard-earned victory settling over her like a heavy cloak. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow across the city. It felt symbolic, a new day was dawning, one that would forever alter the landscape of corporate America. The court had ruled in Lena's favor. Parkview Community Bank was forced to reinstate her as CEO, and the executives who had orchestrated her ousting were either removed from their positions or resigned in disgrace. But the legal victory, while sweet, wasn't the full measure of her triumph. It was the ripple effect of her fight that mattered more, the change it sparked in the corporate world and the message it sent to black professionals everywhere. Lena's phone buzzed constantly, but the flood of congratulatory messages and media requests felt distant. She was already focused on what came next. The court had mandated sweeping reforms within the bank, including diversity training, a restructuring of the board, and the implementation of policies to prevent further racial discrimination. But Lena knew that these changes, while important, were just the beginning. True progress would only come when the systems that had enabled racism at every level of corporate life were dismantled, and she was committed to leading that charge. As she entered the bank's headquarters for the first time since her reinstatement, a sea of employees stood waiting. They weren't just there for her return as CEO, they were there to honor the courage and resilience she had shown in the face of what seemed like insurmountable odds. Her legal battle had become their battle, her victory a shared triumph. Lena's gaze swept across the room, and for a moment, she let herself breathe, absorbing the overwhelming support from her colleagues. This was the moment she had fought for, the moment she could finally say, "We did it." But there was no time for complacency. The road ahead would still be difficult, filled with challenges, but Lena was ready. She had already broken one glass ceiling. Now it was time to shatter more. For Lena Williams, this was just the beginning of her journey. Her fight for justice had ignited a fire in the hearts of many, and she was determined to keep pushing for change, for equality, and for a future where people of color would no longer be treated as second-class citizens in the corporate world. As she walked into her office, she knew that the work ahead would not only define her legacy at Parkview Community Bank but also serve as a beacon of hope for every black professional who had been overlooked, undermined, or dismissed. The fight for justice was far from over, but for now, Lena could finally say that she had won.